Welcome to The People's View, a program dedicated to discussing local, state, and national issues and their effect on the American people. The People's View provides a platform for state representatives and national figures to present their viewpoint. Whether it's social, economic, or financial topics, you'll hear it on The People's View.
Welcome to The People's View. This is Representative Carl Seidel as your host, and this time we have Jennifer Horn as our co-host. Representative Pete Silver had to be up at Concord for the day. Jennifer, can you tell us a little something about yourself?
Well, thanks for inviting me to be part of it, Carl. I'm really happy to be here. I'm a longtime resident of Nashua, the founder of We the People, and folks can find us online at wethepeoplefreedomforum.org. And I'm very excited and happy to have our guest with us today, gubernatorial candidate Kevin Smith.
Kevin, the Nashua Republican City Committee, who sponsors this show, is happy to have you aboard.
Well, I'm very happy to be here, Carl, and on the air with you, and Jennifer, you as well. It's always great to be in Nashua. I try to get here as frequently as possible. In fact, as we're taping this show right now, I'll be speaking to the Nashua City Committee tonight, and look forward to talking to that group over there. But I'm very familiar with Nashua. In fact, many times I've been on Jennifer's show on WSMN with her, and you've got a great crew over here in Nashua. Well,
to let you know, too, that this taping will be on the archive file for all these public access stations in New Hampshire. So
great.
You ought to get your friends pick it up on and advertise it through.
I'll make sure we televise this from
Spread
Nashua to Colebrook.
Okay.
Spread the word.
Right.
But Ken, tell us something about why you came out to run for governor.
Sure. Well, you know, look, my feeling is that New Hampshire is in desperate need of a long-term plan, a long-term vision for how we're going to be the most economically competitive state in the country over the next 10 years. You know, we've been doing a lot of what I call management by crisis for the last 8 years. We're always planning to the next budget and the next year and not thinking long-term. And we really need to start doing that. We need to talk about how we're going to have the most competitive jobs, high-paying, sustainable jobs over the next 10 years. How we're going to better deliver health care more efficiently and at a lower cost. Better deliver education, reform state government and modernize state government, and reduce our energy costs. There's all these different areas where we have challenges right now in the state. And we're going to need bold ideas and new solutions to meet those challenges, and that's what I've been talking about. And I feel that my background, having served in the legislature, I've been in the executive branch with Governor Benson and helped make appointments to various boards and commissions while I was there, and worked at the Department of Health and Human Services, helped get reforms there. I've seen the good, bad, and ugly of state government, and so I think I know a thing or two about how it works. And so I think with my background and the ideas and solutions I have for how we can get this state moving, you know, I think that uniquely qualifies me to be governor.
Let's start with some of that. Let's talk a little bit about jobs. You talk about the need for long-term, good-paying, sustainable jobs.
Right.
That's a challenge we're seeing across the country, in addition to right here at home. I know that you were up testifying for Right to Work today.
That's right.
Let's talk a little bit about Right to Work in greater detail. First, so that people can understand what it's really all about, and secondly, how does that bring jobs to the economy here in New Hampshire?
Sure. Well, Jen, you know, look, Right to Work, it's very simple. It gives the employees the freedom of choice on whether or not to join a union as a condition of employment. And right now, if they're working in a job that has a union there, they don't have that choice. Either they have to join the union or they're paying what's called the fair share, so they're still paying into the union. And this would simply...
Which is often almost as much as the full union dues.
Correct, right. And so this would give them the choice of whether or not they want to join the unions. And the fact of the matter is that if you look at job growth over the last 10 years, a lot of the jobs, particularly the manufacturing jobs, and those are the kind of jobs we need in New Hampshire, have been created more in the right-to-work states, the South and Midwestern states. Now, there's no state north of Virginia that is right-to-work. So New Hampshire, if we were to become a right-to-work state, would be the only state north of Virginia, only state in the region. I think we would be a haven for new companies to move into here, because we also don't have an income tax, which is a very favorable variable for us. But, I've been saying all along, it's what government can do. Government isn't going to create jobs, but government can create the atmosphere that's going to bring the environment that's going to bring the jobs into the state. And so right to work is just one variable of many variables that, that companies and businesses look at when they decide whether or not they're going to continue to grow here in the state or move here into the state. One of the other things I've been talking a lot about is our corporate tax. We have one of the highest corporate taxes right now in the country, between our business profits tax and our business enterprise tax. We tax businesses right now that don't even make a profit year over year. And that's just not right. It's not fair. Especially for startups, because a lot of times you've got people that are just starting a business, they're not making money the first few years, but we're still taxing them right now. We shouldn't be doing that. So what I would propose is lowering the business profits tax, lowering the business enterprise tax, and eliminating completely the tax on businesses that aren't making any money, because they're already taking a risk as it is, and we want them to take that risk. We want entrepreneurs to feel good about starting a business in the state of New Hampshire. And we're already putting them at a larger risk by saying we're going to tax you anyway, regardless if you make money. That's just not right. So that's one thing we can do is lower our corporate tax rate. The other thing we need to do is get rid of a lot of the regulations on small businesses. We're overburdening our small businesses with regulations right now. I hear it all the time. And a lot of them don't even know some of the regulations, and then they get penalized from some of these state departments for not complying with the regulations. It would be nice if they had a warning first, before they get penalized right off the bat. But we need to eliminate a lot of these regulations so that we can say to small businesses, we are serious in New Hampshire about letting small businesses thrive and about growing new types of businesses, manufacturing, high-tech, biotech jobs, internet digital related technology kind of jobs. There are trade jobs in the state right now. We have a deficiency of workers for trade positions. And these are good, high-paying, highly skilled jobs in the state. And so we need to grow those kind of jobs in the state, but we're only going to do it by creating a very favorable business climate.
That's a great comprehensive plan for creating, as you talk about, a better climate, a friendlier climate to grow jobs. But let's talk about how do you get those sort of things done? I mean, for the past 8 years, we've had a governor who has been committed to vetoing right to work, for example. And now John Lynch isn't running again. You're going to be running against either Jackie Silly or Maggie Hassan or who knows who else might get in on the other side, and assuming that you win your primary. But we've got kind of an interesting mix in the State House these days as well, because it's a mix of traditional Republicans, traditional Democrats, Libertarians, There's more to being governor than just having a good plan.
Right.
How do you bring the leadership to that, to get that done, to bring people to your plan?
Well, that's just it. You have to know how to work with the legislature. And as Carl knows, it's a give and take. No governor can walk in and pretend that they're going to be dictator. A lot of times we hear people that have run a business and decide they want to get into politics and say, well, I'm gonna run for executive now of the state because I'm going to run the state like a business. Well, guess what? Right. It's an entirely different animal. You can bring business acumen and the right business principles to state government, but thinking you can run it exactly like a business, that you can be CEO and call the shots,
doesn't work even.
It doesn't work.
Administration.
No, no, it doesn't work. And so you have to know how to work with the legislature, which is something that I feel I do know how to do, having done it in many different facets of state government. And as I said, there has to be give and take with the legislature too. You're not always going to get all of your agenda. But the good news is that if I were to become governor with a Republican majority, I know they would be committed as well to seeing that we are a very business-friendly state. And so we could work together on moving that agenda forward.
What about the people that are implementing all the legislation? Those are the people that you might have to have a mindset change. These are the people that are been indoctrinated almost. I'm on this.
The bureaucrats.
Well, the bureaucrats.
They're the ones that actually run
that
the
actually do it.
agencies.
They run the rules. They run the fines. You talked about fines going in with 10 days response and stuff.
Right.
We're going after that right now, where they have to give a warning first. But I've heard something today just about people who are really browbeat to handle workman's comp and stuff for independent contractors who are supposed to take care of their own workman's comp. and they get defined as something, and they have no recourse.
Yeah. Well, Carl, I think, again, that starts at the top. It starts with leadership at the top. And you set the tone with your commissioners to let them know how the departments ought to be run. And what Governor Lynch has done is essentially told his department heads, hey, look, you guys are going to be fee collection agencies.
That's right.
You know, you're going to go after revenue without giving any consideration to the small business guy. Because, you know, for 4 years when the Democrats were in control, it was all about spending and taxes. Remember, there was almost a $1 billion deficit when the Republicans took back the legislature. And so Governor Lynch was bent on finding revenue anywhere he could, even if that meant going after the small guy, just so that he could fill the gap in state government. And so to me, that was irresponsible management there. And the leadership, as I said, really starts at the top. You know, we've all seen Governor Lynch's approval ratings. You know, they're near 70% consistently. But you know what, Carl? That comes from a lack of leadership, of not having a backbone and sometimes standing up and doing the right thing. And being governor is not about having a popularity contest. It's about leading and about making the right decisions for the state. And that means sometimes people aren't going to like you for the decisions you make, but at least you're making a decision. So, you know.
But you won't be running against John Lynch. You're going to be running against Jackie Silly or Maggie Hassan or one of those.
Well,
but and remember, Jackie just announced this week, and she was talking about pledge politics. Pledge politics or bad politics, I think she said. And she was talking about the pledge that traditionally the people of New Hampshire have asked all of our candidates to take, that they pledge not to enact a statewide income tax or other sort of general tax. I've got 2 boys in college. I want them to come back to New Hampshire when they get out of school, whether they want to start a business or get into some other sort of industry. I want them to come, you know, feel like they want to come back and raise a family in New Hampshire.
Right.
Are pledge politics bad politics? And is staying with that pledge part of, you know, growing that business environment and getting our young people to come back to New Hampshire again?
Well, Jennifer, I mean, this is the very telling thing. You know, Jackie's trying to get around this by saying, well, I'm not getting into pledge politics. I don't care if there's a pledge or not. You should not be for a sales or income tax in this state, period. It would cripple the economy in this state. And if you don't get that, regardless if there's a pledge or not, to me, you have a severely flawed economic plan. And you look, both Jackie and Maggie at one time or another have supported a broad-based tax. And frankly, I can't wait to run against, you know, one of them, whoever ends up being the nominee for that party, because they have a record that I can't wait to tell the New Hampshire voters about voting for, you know, the biggest tax increases over a 4-year span, the biggest spending increases in the state's history. I mean, they want to spend us into an oblivion. It's what got us into this mess in the first place. And so, you know, Jackie can try to get around it all she wants by saying that she doesn't want to play pledge politics. Well, how about just saying, I don't think a sales or income tax would be good for the state, you know? One other thing I do want to go back to is, and I know this affects a lot of people that live here in Nashua, and that is the amount of people that have to travel out of state every day to go to work. You know, New Hampshire is 49th per capita in the country of the amount of people that travel out of state every day to go to work, only in front of the state of Maryland. And of course, all of those folks are going to our favorite place, Washington, D.C. But so many of our citizens have to travel to Massachusetts to find a high-paying job. And that's just not right, because they're paying mass income tax every year from working down there. Wouldn't it be great if we had not only the greatest place in the country to live, but the greatest place in the country to work as well? And I would be very aggressive about calling CEOs in the state of Massachusetts and telling them why they ought to move their business to New Hampshire, and to tell them about what we're doing in New Hampshire to make it a more favorable environment for them to move their businesses here. You know, I've said often that I want to be Deval Patrick's worst nightmare. I want him to know that I'm calling the businesses in his state every week and telling them why they should move to the state of New Hampshire. I think a little bit of healthy, friendly competition is a good thing.
That's good.
And I'd be happy to get into that with them, because, as I said, we've got too many of our people that right now that are going out of state to work, and it's just not right.
Well, and it goes beyond that. You know, as I was referring to a little bit, our young people are leaving permanently. You know, the jobs, you know, we've seen here in New Hampshire, our unemployment has been protected. It's always been a little bit better than it is nationally. And I think that pledge politics that the Democrats refer to are a big part of that. But if we want to continue that and get that unemployment even lower and continue that sort of growth, we need things like right to work, like the BET and the business profits tax, the kinds of bold plans that you're talking about. But there are a lot of other things around in New Hampshire that we really need to look at if we want people to see it as a place to come and raise your family.
Right.
And it's not just those things. Those are important, but it's about quality of life.
It
It's
is.
about education.
It is.
Excuse me. It's about education and things
right.
like that.
You're selling them on the complete package
Right.
of New Hampshire. Losing our young people is an alarming thing right now because we are losing them at a rate that is not, the trend is not good right now.
I think we're the second oldest state in the country.
I don't know if we're the second oldest. We may be. What I do know is that we passed the state of Florida last year for median age. So we have a higher median age in the state of Florida. That's not a good
Right.
trend. We need to keep our young people here. We've got great schools in our state. And the young people are going to those schools. They're going to Dartmouth and the Whittemore School of Business at UNH. We've got St. Anselm College, Plymouth State. So many great colleges, but they're leaving after they graduate. And we need to find a way to keep them here, again, by creating those jobs that are going to be around here a long time. I would love to use state government as a conduit between our schools, the universities, the community colleges, the trade schools, and the businesses. Connect the two and get them talking to one another so that we know where their job pool is, what kind of workers they're looking for after students come out of school, but also so we can put our students on a career path.
That's right.
So that once they graduate,
Exactly.
they have a job to go into, that they know they can stay right here in New Hampshire.
That's what it's about.
I think
That's
the
exactly
governor
it.
has to have that way of integrating it, getting the message going from the businesses
Right.
and to the colleges or the community colleges.
Right. Well, and there are some businesses that are already proactive on doing this. Hypertherm up in the Upper Valley, they do a very
Right.
good job of working with the community college system to let them know what kind of skilled workers they're looking for. Cabletron was very successful at doing this, working with UNH and making sure that they had students coming out that could go right to work. I mean, but we need more of that. And again, there's no reason why state government, through the resources we already have. I'm not talking about creating a whole new division.
Definitely.
We already have the resource. We just need to move where the priorities are right now. And there should be priorities on making
Get that
sure.
focus. You need that focus to go after that.
That's
kind
right.
of-
That's right.
Well, I think we've lacked that in the leadership we've had in the state, not just out of the governor's office, but out of the State House as well over the last 4, 6, 8 years. We have lacked that, and we've seen kind of a resurgence of that focus on the
Business end,
responsible economic
We have.
policies over the last year or so, and we're seeing the results of that. If you talk to our small business owners, if you look at our unemployment rate. But let's kind of step away from the jobs part of all this too. One of the biggest challenges that I think, with all due respect to Governor Lynch, that I think he has failed on is education funding reform.
Right.
And it's been something that's been hanging over our heads for, I think, nearly a decade now.
Since I was in the legislature, and
So
that
for
was
more
in
than a decade.
1997.
So
it was been hanging over our heads.
You're aging yourself now. That's good.
I know.
but it continues to be a significant challenge. So, and I know that the folks up in Concord are looking at a couple of different options. What do we do? How do we solve that in a way that is economically responsible, that honors the commitment we have to our children to provide them with a quality education,
Right.
but also honors the role that the taxpayers play in funding that education?
Well, again, 8 years. 8 years squandered. He's had 8 years to fix this. When he ran against Governor Benson, and I know all too well because I was working for Governor Benson at the time, he pledged to solve the education funding crisis.
Right.
And still hasn't done it after 8 years. I do think the right way to go is to have a constitutional amendment that simply allows the state to target the aid to the areas that need it the most. The very property-rich towns, we don't have to target the aid there. But the property-poor towns is where we need to give more resources to so that they are on equal footing. If
there's special needs, too.
Absolutely, absolutely, Carl. But allow the legislature the flexibility to be able to target that aid.
So
and
put it back in the hands of the legislature.
Yes.
So that the people we elect to make these decisions are actually the ones making
That's
the
right.
decisions.
Right. I mean,
What a novel idea.
putting it, I know that, I don't know if the courts want it in their hands or not. Sometimes I think they do,
Right.
if they do want it in their hands. But, I think the courts, frankly, would like it out of their hands as well, and to let the so that they don't have to keep getting embroiled in these lawsuits over and over. let's get an amendment passed that simply allows the legislature to target the aid to the communities where it's needed the most. And then from there, you have the combination of state funding and local funding. I think that's the right way to do it. But again, it takes leadership. It takes leadership at the top to, the governor tried, quote unquote, tried doing it when the Democrats were in control. They didn't even pass it out of the House of Representatives, despite him supposedly pushing for it. So it's high time we had this on the ballot so that, because here's the biggest thing. The towns and the cities need to know how much aid they're getting year after year. It shouldn't be Russian roulette every year where they're wondering, okay, are we going to be gaining state aid? Are we going to be losing state aid? There should be a set formula so that they can plan their budgets appropriately, so that they can plan down the road and not be wondering what is Concord going to do to us this year.
But there has to be enough flexibility built into that so that when one school district faces an unexpected challenge, or when the economy changes in 3 years or 5 years or 10 years, I mean, there's got to be enough flexibility in that to be able to answer the needs of the community as well as you go through it.
Absolutely.
One of the I just read recently that the State House, you folks are looking at taking New Hampshire out of No Child Left Behind.
That's correct, but it's all been tabled because they want to know what the financial consequences are.
Well, and that's what I was, one of the big challenges with No Child Left Behind are these federal mandates and being accountable to the federal Department of Education. I think quite honestly, from my experience talking to folks, not just in Nashville, but across the 2nd District, is that it's almost become a nonpartisan issue. Whether you're Republican or Democrat, I think people feel very strongly that our schools don't have enough control over their own budgets and their own curriculum. How do we wrest back some of that control?
Jen, here's the travesty of the whole thing, because you're absolutely right. It's bipartisan agreement now that No Child Left Behind is not working, and that the schools need much more flexibility, and that their hands are tied too much behind their back with this federal mandate. The problem is that we've become so dependent on that federal money that's where the rub is, and that's why it hasn't passed the legislature yet to get us out of it, because everyone's going, oh, well, what does that mean in loss of federal funds? Isn't it a shame? Isn't it a shame that nobody likes these federal mandates, and everyone agrees it's harming our schools and not helping them, but we're not sure if we can get out of it because we're so dependent on the federal money. That is why if I were governor, I want a top-down review of all the federal funds we're currently receiving, all the mandates, and how much money we're spending as a state trying to comply with all of these mandates. I used to ask that when I worked for Health and Human Services. I said, has anyone ever done a cost-benefit analysis to see actually how much money we were spending as a state and locally just to comply with these onerous federal mandates to get these federal funds? And I don't think anyone is looking at that. I would want a top-down review of those things. But there's a lesson to be learned here, and that is we cannot get addicted to the federal funding.
But the federal funding is our money. This is what kills me about this whole.
It is,
it's very cyclical. It's money that I earn, that I send to the state, or send directly to the federal government. Somehow it ends up down there. It's like they take their overhead in exchange and then send it back to us. How do we break that cycle? We can't break it in certain areas. We understand that the federal government does have a certain amount of authority, but how do we end that cycle of constantly sending them money that they shouldn't have to begin with and keep it in the state where it belongs?
Jen, I mean, look, Obamacare is a perfect example of this. And it's high time that the states, that New Hampshire, again, looked at all of these federal mandates and said, which ones are we going to get out of? Which ones can we get out of? Yeah, as you mentioned, there are some that we can't.
Assuming Obamacare has not been repealed yet, as governor, would you join the lawsuits to get and have New Hampshire join that effort?
Absolutely. It would be so fiscally irresponsible not to do so, because the price tag of that has been, the analysis has been anywhere between 10 and $20 billion that it would cost the state over the next 20 years. And the state can't afford that. That's double the state budget right now. And of course, the Democrats look at that and say, hey, this is a great way to back us into a broad-based tax. I don't know what planet they're living on if they think that the state can, that the taxpayers, when we talk about the state affording these programs, it's the taxpayers that have to foot the bill for it. And that's what we can't forget. So absolutely, I would have us join the lawsuit. I'm hoping, though, by that time, it'll already be settled at this point.
Well, things are going on right now that they're taking care of. I mean, they don't want to join the insurance exchange. You know, and
Well, and that's
get a
another-
penalty.
And is that going to pass? Is that going to keep?
I don't know. I think so, but it's some people are arguing again. Well, you're going to do it one way or the other, and
Right.
one of the business organizations think it's good. I disagree with them.
Well-
I don't think it.
Well, no, they're only telling you half the story, Carl,
Yeah.
because what they're saying is, hey, look, you know, we don't like Obamacare as much as you don't like
Right.
it, but let's at least have these exchanges set up by the state so that we can control the money and the programs as opposed to the federal government doing it. What they're not telling you is that while the federal government will pay for the initial setup of the exchanges,
Right.
it then gets turned over to the states, and it's the price tag on it is, I think, $10 million a year.
Well,
It's
it
gonna
becomes
cost
an
us-
indefinite commitment then.
Exactly.
Forever.
Exactly.
And you don't
Right.
control the regulation.
And you don't control
Right.
the regulation.
Right.
It becomes another way of the federal government backing the states into
Right.
having to take on these burdens. And it's high time we say enough is enough with this.
That's right.
You know, the federal mandates have got to stop because it's crippling the state economies. And you know, No Child Left Behind is a perfect example of this. We'd all like it to go away, but it's a shame that we're having to make this decision over losing the federal money. I'm hoping we can come to a compromise solution on this, you know, even if it means we have to tighten our belts for a few years to get us out of No Child Left Behind so that we can improve our, I mean, we know best, New Hampshire knows best how to run our education system, not Washington, D.C.
Ask any parent in the state who they would like to see be in charge. Let's back out of policy a little bit and talk campaign. You're running for governor. It's statewide race, and and we all know especially some of us who have done these, district-wide races, how incredibly enormous. That's an enormous challenge you're taking on,
Right.
not just with your time and the planning, but the finances, what it costs to run that kind of race. And so far in the race, we have a gentleman who's fairly unknown, Steve Kenda. I think he's looking at it, but someone who's very well known among Republican voters, Ovid LaMontagne. That's an enormous challenge that you take on. How do you run a successful campaign under those circumstances?
Well, it's doing what you have to do in New Hampshire to win elections, and it's retail politics. It's getting out to house parties, speaking at GOP events, which I seem to be doing every night. It's doing cable access shows like this one here. It's meeting as many people as you possibly can, telling them what your vision is for the state and why you think you have the experience and the background to do it. And that's what I've been doing all over the state so far. It's definitely the biggest task I've ever undertaken, but I feel very passionately about it because I feel we need a governor that has a plan, that has a vision, but also knows how to implement it. You know, I've said that the governor's position is a 2-year term, and so there's not a lot of time for on-the-job training. When you go in there, you've got to know what you're going to do and how you're going to do it. And I feel that I've got experience in showing that I've gotten reforms and know how to get reforms in state government. You know, when I was working for the Juvenile Justice Department, one of the first things I asked when I went to the department was, I said, what's the recidivism rate here? You know, how many kids enter the juvenile justice system, we rehabilitate them, they leave, and then they return? And no one could give me an answer on it. And I'm saying, how are we possibly funding all of these programs where we're not even keeping data and metrics?
We don't even know what we're spending.
There's no
and what we're
quality
getting for it.
control in that whole thing.
No.
I've heard we have audits. People go into these agencies and audit and what
We have
business practice.
financial audits.
Well, they also have some audits on the process, but they don't follow the recommended changes.
Well, that's government.
But Carl,
That's not just New Hampshire,
it's more than
unfortunately.
it's more than just auditing the process
Oh, yeah.
and auditing, the finances. Are the programs working? And that was the biggest thing I wanted to know. And I said, I don't want to get anyone in trouble. I'm not doing this to punish anyone. I just want to know if the programs are working that we're funding. And so one of the things we did is we implemented the first ever taxpayer accountability report card when I was at Juvenile Justice that measured the efficacy of all of these different programs that we were funding, gave us a baseline to work from so that we could see going forward whether or not these programs were actually working. And guess what? The ones that were working, okay, great, we'll continue to fund those. And the ones that weren't, we either had to reform them or eliminate them. But at least we knew where the money should go now, rather than just, throwing good money after bad money.
And that's the problem at the heart of government everywhere, though. We see it in New Hampshire, we see it in Washington, we see and anywhere I've ever lived, that's been the problem, is that we don't have leadership that's willing to go in and ruffle people's feathers. I mean, because when you do something like what you just talked about, the Department of Juvenile Justice, we need to do that government-wide. We need to do it government-wide. But you need somebody who's got the spine, the backbone to do it, because, as you said, people get offended. People feel like they're being criticized, or they don't want, they're worried that, God, what if we find out we can actually live with a couple fewer employees?
Right.
So that takes a tremendous, that's leadership, that's courage, that's backbone.
Well, and it's being transparent with the employees as well. I mean, look I was a state employee. I obviously worked with many state employees, most of whom were unionized, some weren't. But you know what I found is that for the most part, most of them are good, hardworking people that want to do their job. They want to do their job well. You always hear the stories about the dead wood in state government. The fact of the matter is that dead wood exists no matter what the industry is. Now, it may be a little harder to get rid of the dead wood in state government than it is in private industry, but the fact remains that the majority of the workers are good, hardworking people. And I worked with some great people when I worked for the state. And if you're transparent with them and tell them why it is you're doing something, and that you're not looking to just, go after people, but that you want to make sure you're doing your job as effectively as possible, I think they appreciate that.
They need to know what the end game is. And I think you're right. When I've spoken to people in state government, just the same way that small business owners often feel like government is getting in the way of them doing what they need to do, I feel like a lot of our state employees feel like government gets in the way of them doing what they're there to do.
Jennifer, I'll give you a perfect example. At Juvenile Justice, we have the Youth Services Center in Manchester, and of course it's a full facility that houses juvenile delinquents, but we have a school there as well because they have to go to school during the day. And we had good, conscientious, hardworking teachers that would show up to work early to prep for the day. And Human Resources found out about this and said to us as management, they can't be doing that. They said, you either have to pay them overtime or they have to show up right when their work begins. And I'm saying, I can't believe this. Here are these conscientious employees that are doing this, voluntarily coming in early because they want to prep for the day. We didn't have the money to pay them overtime, but we're being told by state government, because of these rules that are not flexible, that are in place, that they can't come in early to prep. That to me is unacceptable.
It's stupid government is what it is.
Well, Jennifer,
it makes average citizens and taxpayers like me crazy.
Right, and so
it makes us crazy.
It's those kind of things where you need to have flexibility.
Common sense.
Common sense. Here's another example. I had employees, union employees. Now, the way the contract was structured and the rules were is that they had to have their 15-minute break, halfway in the morning, 30-minute lunch, and then a 15-minute break in the afternoon. And they came to me and said, Kevin, when I'm working through the day, I'd rather not break up my mornings and afternoons. Can I just combine them to take an hour lunch? And I said, seems fine to me. In fact, you're probably more efficient doing it that way. So I should, sure you can. Once again, as soon as Human Resources found out about it, no, you can't have them doing that. It has to be that. I mean, come on. You need to allow this kind of flexibility if you're going to maximize as much work as you can. And again, no one was forcing them to do it. They were asking me if they could do that. That's common sense, and supervisors and managers in state government need to have that kind of flexibility.
Well, we're almost winding up
I
on
would say,
this one.
before we wrap up, tell us, we'll get out of the politics side of it, here completely, speaking of flexibility. I know what's involved in running a big campaign, and I know what a burden it can be on family.
Yeah.
You've got a lovely wife, Susie.
Very lovely, very special wife.
Patient, generous, kind.
Keep the adjectives going, Jennifer.
Beautiful.
Yes.
There you go. You better keep the adjectives going. How's it been for Susie and the kids? Tell us a little bit about your family and how you're able to kind of incorporate family and campaign.
Sure.
Because your kids are young.
They are. We have 3 kids. We live in Litchfield, right around the corner from here. And of course, I can get here a lot easier now with the new airport access bridge. It doesn't take too long.
Thanks to the Ray Wazorek Bridge.
The Ray Wazorek Bridge, but yeah, we've lived in Litchfield since 2004. We have 3 small kids: Colby, who's 7, Lindsay, who's age 5, and Tommy, who's age 3. And I'll tell you, my wife, she's an incredibly special, patient person to allow me. I couldn't run without her support.
Yeah, definitely.
Right.
And
Right.
she's given me her full support, and she's been absolutely great about it. I've said that I'm going to petition the Vatican when the campaign is over to anoint her to sainthood, because she certainly deserves it. But she's been a great support for me. And I'll tell you a quick funny story. Before I had announced that I was running for governor, we were all in the car together one day, and I said, "So guys, Dad's thinking about running for governor. What do you think about that?" And immediately my daughter, who's 5, speaks up and says, "I don't think so, Dad." And I was very taken aback by this, and I wasn't sure why she said it. And I said, "Well, how come, Lindsay?" She goes, "Because, Dad, I've seen you run, and I'm pretty sure there's others who can run faster than you."
Very cute.
You better hope not.
Very true. So now when I'm around, then I'm now walking
So
for
you're
governor,
walking.
so they understand I have a better chance of winning than running for governor.
Okay, very
Well,
good.
thank you for
Well,
making time for us today.
Well,
So
thanks for
where can
having me
people learn
on.
more about you?
They can go to my website. It's kevinsmithforgovernor.com. They can go there and sign up for emails, or they can make $5,000 donations at the same time if they want to do that as well.
For all you folks looking to give $5,000.
Yes, exactly, right. But
Let's
no.
say it again, kevinsmithforgovernor.com.
That's right.
Thanks
yes.
for coming out
All right,
today.
Jennifer,
It was great to
thank
have you
you.
here.
much.
Carl, thanks for having me
Okay,
on.
this again was sponsored by the Nashua City Committee for the Republicans, and our website is nashuagop.org, and our monthly meetings are the second Thursday of the month. Next one is March 8th at 7 p.m. in the Crown Plaza. Okay, thank you very much for joining us.
And thank you for having me.
Thank you.